Good morning, everybody. Everyone's populating right now. Hello, welcome. Please make sure audio is muted. Thank you. Great, there we go. Hello, just waiting for everybody to join in. We have a couple of people still waiting. Hello, all. All right, a couple of people still joining up here. We're waiting for their audio to connect, and then we're going to begin. Here we go. Couple more. Please do make sure that your audio is muted and that your video is also turned off. That's going to make our lives easier chatting with Sal. All right, a couple more still hopping in. I hope everybody's having a good morning so far. We're looking forward to our conversation. Let's see here. If you have any questions or problems at any time, feel free to just send me a chat in the chat room and I'll be able to help in any way I can. All right, one more person. And here we go. Another one jumping in. Good. All right, this is looking good. Everybody seems to have their audio up. Every time I click one, another one seems to pop in. All right, this is great. So far, we're up to 25 people hopping on this conversation. I'm glad you all made time for us this morning. Thank you. And as I said, 26, another one. Here we go. Making sure everybody, please make sure that your microphone is muted and that your video camera is also turned off. If you have any questions, just send me a chat and I'll be happy to help in any way I can. Let's see here. Good, there we go. Now we're looking like we have everybody on. And I spoke too soon. Have one last one. Give it a couple more seconds and then we're going to move forward and we'll just have people join in as they populate. That's fine. All right, well, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our very first Chit Chat with Sal St. George. Today we're talking about Sid Caesar. I am Darren St. George, and I'm going to be facilitating this conversation. You'll notice I do have everybody's microphone and video turned off. Please maintain that. This way we can more easily converse with Sal. If you have any questions or trouble, just send me a chat in the chat window, and I'll be able to help in any way possible. Now, I'd like you to, and if you don't already know Sal, for over 35 years, he has been creating educational and entertaining historical programming, both for theater and film, with a particular focus on comedy and the history of comedy. He's an acclaimed playwright and a published author. He is also a professor and lecturer for countless libraries and public institutions across Long Island. But most significantly, and I am proud to say, I would not be here today without him, for he is my father. So ladies and gentlemen, let's begin our Chit Chat with Sal St. George. Sal, are you there with us? Come on aboard.
How are we doing?
There we go. Great. Can you please start your video?
Okay.
Here we are. And check the settings. There. Bottom left-hand corner, you should, there we go. Great.
Good morning, everyone. Well, this is a real treat. This is an unusual way for all of us to be meeting. It's been a difficult time for everyone. I'm still trying to figure out how to shave without touching my face. It's an interesting life that we're in right now. I just received this morning an interesting email. I accidentally misspelled Sid Caesar's name, and it was brought to my attention. And you know how sometimes something brings back a memory from decades ago? I'll give you a little information. Many, many moons ago, I was like the Radar O'Reilly of my company when I was in the Army. And I've always had this, I was always typing. That's how they ended up making me the company clerk. And one day, one of my colleagues came storming into the office complaining because I spelled his name wrong. His name is Michael. I don't know if you can see that. And I reversed the E and the A, just as I did with Sid Caesar. I just reversed the E and the A. I can never get that right. You know, I am trying to figure it out. A before E, except after C, except on Thursdays and Fridays or whatever. So after that, I finally learned I never made a mistake with his name again. I always spelled it properly. You got it? Okay. Okay. So that covers that. And if that, oh my gosh, that should be the least of our problems today. This is the first time we're working with this technology. We hope everything goes smoothly. One of the things people always ask me is, what am I working on next? And I just wanted to give you a little background on some of the things I'm doing. I'm a book freak, as Darren will attest. The two books I'm reading right now, this is called Andy and Don, and it's the story of the relationship and friendship between Don Knotts and Andy Griffith during their times together, for how many decades they were together. And the other book I'm reading, which I really am enjoying, and this reflects to what we're talking today about. Larry Gelbart was one of the great writers on Sid Caesar's show. And Larry also ended up writing A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Tootsie. He was responsible for transferring MASH from a movie into a TV show. And this book tells all about it. I'm really enjoying this one in particular because he talks about comedy a lot in it. He was one of the great comedy writers. As a matter of fact, I got to read you something. He said, they asked him in the book, why are all the writers on your show of shows young and Jewish? And he answered, that's probably because our parents are old and Jewish, which I thought was funny. And they asked him, how do you write funny? And I go through this all the time when I'm writing my scripts. How do you write funny? How do you do that? And he said, well, you put your ass in a chair and you hope your head gets the message.
I'd also like everyone to know that if you are interested in reading along with Sal, I sent Amazon links to both of those books, and you'll see them in the chat window. You can just click there and buy your copy and read as well.
Wow, you're fast.
Yeah, try to keep up.
Right. The other thing I'm working on is, many of you have probably already saw my Abbott and Costello lecture. But I'm doing a more definitive version of that, and I'm going through a lot of my files, and I'm finding a lot of things that I just did not incorporate into that particular lecture. It's going to be more definitive, but I want to show you something. I don't know if you can see, I've got a stack of photographs here. And when I went to meet Bud Abbott in his home, these are the actual photographs I brought with me. And he was looking through them. And there's Bud and Lou. And he was looking through all these, which were fun. I had a great time with him. And this is from a movie they did called Ride 'em Cowboy. Okay, you can see that. I want to just show you two more, and then we'll be through. This is another of them. So he was looking through all of these, and then he got to this photograph, and he stopped. And he had this smile on his face, and I said, what's so funny about this photo? And he looked at me, he says, I still have that shirt. Now this movie was made in 1941, and I met him in the 70s, so it was a 30-year-old shirt that he still had in his closet, which I thought was kind of funny. All right, so the topic of today, I hope everybody took the moment to watch your show of show. It's one of their best. I just want to say something quick about your show of shows. It was on for about 4 years. They did 90 minutes of comedy every Saturday night, all those years, and they did 39 episodes a year. Now, to put that in perspective, Saturday Night Live, which is the grandchild of your show of shows, they do maybe 20. So these gentlemen were, and they didn't have the benefit of what we have today. They had so many commercials today. You didn't have that back in the 50s. So when they were doing 39 shows a year, they really were working hard to get all that material together. All right, some of the writers on that show. I hope you watch the clip because it's really going to help in a moment. Um, Michael Stewart was one of the writers. His name doesn't always pop up, but he went on after that to do Bye Bye Birdie, Hello Dolly, and a slew of other Broadway shows. Danny Simon, Neil Simon, Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, Mel Tolkien, Selma Diamond, Carl Reiner. Can you imagine having all these people in one room? And one of the funny things that they would always argue with each other. They were very, very adamant about trying to get one of their jokes into that routine. They wanted to be part of the program. And they would argue about which joke was funny or what number was funny. If you if you watch, there's a great PBS special where they got many of them together. And Carl Reiner talks about how they spent hours trying to figure out what number was funny. And they kept throwing out, because Imogene Coca had to say the number. And they wanted to make sure that the joke, the number resonated with the audiences. And they said, Imogene, say 17. And she goes, 17. And they said, try 12. And she'd go, 12. And they went through numbers. He said it was over an hour. And then they finally said to her, say 24. And she went, 24. And that was the number that they used as their funny number. It sounds silly, but comedy is a science. It really takes a lot of hit and miss. I've worked on a lot of programs where I remember one of my actors called me up and she said, this joke you wrote for me is just not working. And I'm on the phone with her and I said, okay, tell me the joke. And she did the joke and I said, you dropped a word out. She said, yeah, I didn't think I needed that word in there. I said, put the word back in. She called me back the next day and she said, how did you know that? She said, it got a big laugh. And it's just the rhythm of the joke required everything to be in place to make it work.
I just want to cut in because I'm curious, in my own curiosity. They came to the conclusion that 24 was funny, but I know in one of your older shows, you went with 42.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, is it just coincident you chose 42 because you found 42 funny? Or, I mean, the fact that you flipped the two numbers for your punchline?
That's coincidental. This was long before I even knew anything about your show or shows. We were doing a routine and I just needed a funny number. And basically one of the actors walked across the stage and she said 42, 42, 42. And then it doesn't work out of context, but then she said 43, 43, 43, and it worked really well. So the 42 really played for us in that instance. And if you have any questions, as always, keep them to yourself. All right. Oh, I just wanted to say about Neil Simon. I had the good fortune of meeting him once in Huntington, as a matter of fact, and I found him to be a very likable, but a very self-effacing, very low-key type of gentleman. When I shook his hand, it was one of those handshakes that was kind of, I hate to say wimpy, but it was a very soft handshake. And if you saw the movie My Favorite Year, they have a lot, please watch that movie and have some laughs. They have scenes that take place in the writer's room. And there's one particular writer that never says anything, but when he has an idea, he'll whisper it to one of the other writers, and that writer will say, how about we try this line? Well, that was Neil. Neil was too afraid to compete with Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner and the rest of them. So he would have funny lines, but he would always keep it to himself. He was living at the time at a very upscale hotel on Central Park West. And one day he got a knock on the door and it was one of the people from the hotel, and the person said, we're taking out laundry. Do you need anything taken? And he gave the kid a suit, a blazer, 3 pairs of pants, and he never saw the kid again. Yeah. So that's the way it worked. Yeah, it was kind of funny.
Do you still have the suit?
What's that?
Said, do you still have the suit?
He lost everything. He lost all this. But that's the way it was. There were scams all the time. People would just pull scams. Sid Caesar lived in Kings Point. For those that are interested, right here on the island, many times they would meet at his house to go over the scripts. Okay, let's get into. Wait a second. I hope you all have your coffee. Do you have your coffee? Let's get into the sketch. This is your story. At the time, one of the most popular shows on the air was This Is Your Life. I know most of you are too young to remember that show, but This Is Your Life was the impetus to create this routine. And according to legend, it was Carl Reiner and Sid Caesar and one of the Howie Morris. I think they were sitting watching an episode of it, and they said to each other, "People really believe this? Is this how you would really react if somebody stopped you and turned your whole life upside down in a matter of minutes?" And that was the start. And they said, "Let's see how this goes." What's interesting about this routine is that the writers always had the final word on the show. It's just like Larry Gelbart with MASH. Once they got the script, they might give suggestions here and there to punch something up, but once the script was submitted, it was gold and you didn't divert from it. What made this particular routine so different is that they allowed Sid and Howie Morris and Carl Reiner to ad lib, because there was no way to write some of those moments, in particular, the opening of the scene when Sid is sitting in the audience. They knew he was going to be out there. They knew they were going to surprise him. What they didn't know was how Sid would react. That was his comic genius. That was what he brought to that moment. Now, you got to remember, Sid was brilliant with dialogue. He loved playing with languages, and we all know how he could speak any language. It was gibberish, but it sounded like it was Italian or French or Russian, Japanese. This routine, you could pretty much count how many words he actually says. It's nearly a silent routine for Sid Caesar, which is not within his comfort zone. So they go into the audience. That was, I think it was called the Central Theater. It held about 3,000 people. You have to remember, this was a time when all theaters were like the Radio City Music Hall, where it held thousands. They converted this particular theater into a TV studio. So they had 3,000 people in that audience. The actors were feeding off those laughs. And there was something about a comedian. You never step on a laugh. You never stop a laugh. You keep it going. And once that audience picked up on what they were doing, there was no stopping any of them. Carl Reiner, we'll start with him, was brilliant. He was doing his version of Ralph Edwards, but he was the perfect straight man. He never lost control, no matter how much insanity was going on. It just kept on going. It just kept on going. He kept it all together. Howie Morris, here is where Sid is one of the most generous performers in show business. There are many comedians that do not like sharing the spotlight. They want to be the star of that moment no matter what. And I don't want to mention names because a lot of people really like Danny Kaye, but there was instances where he did not like having anybody on his show that was as funny or funnier than he was. And consequently, you'll see most of his shows don't have comedy guest stars. Mostly they are singers. He does have a great sidekick on the old Danny Kaye show. You might remember him as Harvey Korman. And once the show was canceled, once the Danny Kaye show was canceled, Carol Burnett grabbed him right away and said, I need you. We're doing a variety show. Would you be interested? And he jumped from there to spending almost 10 years, a decade, working with Carol on her show. So she did the right thing and brought him into something. It was a more collaborative effort too. So anyway, getting back to your show of shows. I wish we could show it now, but it takes too long, right? Right,
It's a
Darren?
long clip. It's a long.
Yeah,
I think it's almost 10 minutes, 8 minutes,
yeah,
somewhere around there.
yeah. It's 9 minutes exactly.
We'll
So
just have to. We'll have to assume everybody did their homework.
yeah, what's fun about it is Howie Morris, and that was the point I was trying to make. Now, Howard Morris goes back to early TV, and many of you will remember him as a recurring character on the Andy Griffith Show. He played Ernest T. Bass, the hillbilly coming out of the mountains all the time to cause havoc in Mayberry. And he was a huge hit on that show, but this is before that. And he did a lot of shows, variety shows. And then after this, he became a great director. He directed many episodes of the Andy Griffith Show and other sitcoms of that era. And then his buddy from your show of shows, Mel Brooks, picked him up and started throwing him into his movies. And you'll see him in The History of the World, Part 1. You'll see him in Part 2, I think, Part 2. You'll see him in High Anxiety and in quite a few other movies that Mel did. So he picked him up and brought him with him. But getting back to Sid, he gave him free rein to do whatever he wanted as Uncle Goopy. Kind of interesting, there were very few jokes, written jokes in this routine. Uncle Goopy, they gave him a funny name. In the opening, they show a picture of Sid Caesar as a baby, and it's basically his face superimposed on an infant's body. But he gave Howie complete reign to do whatever he wanted. He didn't know that Howie was going to grab onto his leg and he'd be dragging him across the room. He didn't know that every time a guest came out, he would jump out of the chair and come running over and have this cluster of bodies on top of each other. There's a moment there where all of a sudden it's just like one big mass of bodies, and you see Howie's head come out from between Carl Reiner's legs. He's underneath him coming through. It's just hysterical. And as I said, I can't imagine what it was like being in that audience, watching all of this unfold before your eyes. They never saw anything. That's another thing. In those days, this was so new in terms of television. The idea of spoofing another TV show had never been done before. Nobody ever took that upon themselves to say, okay, we're going to do our version of Leave It to Beaver. Nobody ever did that. They did it for the first time. A year earlier, they did a very famous spoof of a movie, From Here to Re, and Columbia Pictures sued them for it. They lost the suit because, and for obvious reasons, but people weren't accustomed to a TV show taking pot shots at them. They also did many spoofs on Japanese movies, French movies, just so that they can get Sid to do some of his great characters. How are we doing so far?
You're doing great. Well, since we paused, I do want to take a moment. If anybody has their own impressions, if they've watched this the first time, if they've seen this clip before, just shoot me in the chat a little message as to what your impressions were, or if you have any questions for Sal about the clip. But feel free to do so.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to answer some of your questions for a change. This is so different. I've got just a little sidebar here. I know, just like all of you, I miss being in front of you and doing this live. There is no question about it. In taking what we just discussed, do you think this routine would be as effective had they not had a studio audience? Do you think that this routine would have played as grand as it did without that audience feeding them that laughter, there's just no way they would have really felt that energy, that passion, that spontaneity. They knew, the audience knew everything they were watching was unscripted. They knew it was totally, and I feel the same way when I visit with you folks. I really miss it. And we've talked about this in class many times. I might show you a clip from a TV show that you've seen The Honeymooners, that you've seen 100 times. But when you're sitting in a group of people, whether it's 20, 40, 100, when we're all together, all of a sudden you're laughing out loud. All of a sudden you're hearing the laughter. And why is that? It's because laughter is contagious. Your neighbor is laughing next to you. People in front of you are laughing. It just is contagious. And it takes those moments that we grew up with, that we knew so well, that we knew Ralph was going to do, bang, zoom, we knew it was coming. But now, instead of just smiling at the TV set, you're in a situation where you're allowed to laugh. And that's what I miss about this. I can't hear any of you. I can't even see any of you. Oh. but I'm trusting that you're enjoying yourselves right now. And if not, you could always click out. You know?
We have a few comments. Fred, he said that you introduced him to the clip back at Hutton House. That was the first. That was when he was introduced to this clip. Christine, she says, as an actress, I know without an audience to feed me, it would feel flat and unfulfilling, which I can certainly understand. If you don't get that feedback, what are you doing? And Nina, she says, it is still wonderful, Sal. I'm curious, this idea, if this one act would have been better if it didn't have an audience, would this act have been as successful? I wonder if you can apply this to more sitcoms generally. Is there a difference between sitcoms that are filmed in front of a live studio audience and sitcoms that are then, they get a canned laugh track in post? Do they feel different?
I believe so. There are famous stories about, and I wish I could remember, but I know Mel Brooks has talked about this, where a line in the movie got such a laugh that when they got back into editing, they had to elongate the scene to allow for the laughter. So subsequently now we watch that movie and they do the laugh line, and you might have 2 or 3 seconds and you're waiting for the next line to come through. But that was specifically because the laugh in the theater was so strong. So they had to put that in. In terms of today's sitcoms, and I can't imagine, I'm very, very critical of certain sitcoms because it feels to me so unnatural. It's set up, punchline, laugh, set up, punchline, laugh. And they're losing. There's something about this routine. This is your story with Sid. There's 2 things that come through on this. There's an honesty and a sincerity of the characters. You really feel for them. You feel for Sid when he's being dragged by all the ushers up onto the stage. You could see the sweat coming off his brow, because early TV, you see a lot of that. But you saw he was really hustling and running, trying to get away from him. That was not in the script. So the 4 of them picking him up and dragging him on the stage, him whipping his overcoat at them, that was just so natural for him to get those laughs. It's just, I go back to live audience, or even right now, like I said, I would love to hear the laughters, just to run that clip and hear the laughter. But you know what? We're going to do that soon. Eventually, we're going to come back together again, and eventually we'll be back in the theater again, and we'll be sitting 7 seats apart. And but we'll be back together again, God willing, in the near future. Here's I just wanted to say the irony of all of this. This was on NBC, and on CBS, they just introduced a brand new comedian, and this guy was wiping everybody out. he was the #1 comic. Now you got to remember, Sid had his run. He had a good number of years, and then he continued with other TV series and specials. But at this point in time, NBC was being threatened by CBS because of the great one, Jackie Gleason. Jackie had just gotten his TV show. CBS stole Gleason from the Dumont Network, brought him over there with a multi-million-dollar deal, and he just tore through it. And as we know, Gleason became the #1 Saturday night show for many, many years in that slot. Consequently, your show of shows was at this point given their walking notice. They were being canceled. They had just found out less than a month earlier. They shuffled around some of the writers. They got rid of some of the writers, brought in a couple of new writers, and they started over. The funny thing is, this particular one, let me see if I can find who it was. Hold on one second. Well, it really doesn't even matter. But Mel Brooks and Mel Tolkien were two of the people that they dismissed, believe it or not. Neil Simon and his brother Danny was still there. Joe Stein was brought in, who eventually, I believe he went on to do a little thing, Fiddler on a Roof. So other people were brought in. This last couple of months of the show, last season of the show, think about this. Some of their best routines came from this new blood. And your show, the story, This Is Your Story is one of them. And one of my other favorite routines, which I want to get a clip of to use when we get back together again, is when they imitate a Swiss clock, a big giant cuckoo clock. A brilliant routine, again, utilizing Sid Caesar's pantomime skills. No dialogue. So these two routines are really foreign to what Sid was used to doing all the time. Maybe they overplayed doing all those languages and it got tiring. Here they said, you know what, let's keep him quiet and let him do his pantomime skills and let everybody see how funny he could be without saying anything. Go ahead, Dan.
I'm going to cut in. I have a question here from Nina. She's curious, did the participants know ahead of time who the surprise guest would be?
Are you talking about the real This Is Your Life?
Yeah. No. The real show. I guess so. Did the real show of This Is Your Life know who the surprise guest would be? And I'm curious about Sid's version as well.
No, that was scripted. They knew that Uncle Goopy was going to come out, and Mr. Torch, the fireman, would come out. They knew the voluptuous blonde would come out. That was all set up. But in terms of This Is Your Life, most of the times they had no idea that they were going to be honored that particular day. And many people wanted to be on that program. They wanted to have those accolades. Abbott and Costello were on it, but it was only done with Lou. Bud came in to be part of it, but it was really Lou Costello, This Is Your Life. The most famous one is probably Laurel and Hardy, because Stan, I don't think he said 2 words during the entire 30-minute program, and he was furious that they surprised them. His feeling was they get good money to appear on TV or in concerts, and here he is giving us a pair of cufflinks and a 35mm projector, and they're getting Laurel and Hardy on the show. So he was very, very angry about being part of that program. You can watch it on YouTube, and you'll see his reaction to the whole thing. Good question, by the way. I like that one. Any other?
Nope, that's it for questions right now. You can just, if anybody has a question, you can just send it to everyone in the meeting. That's fine. It doesn't have to be private, whatever you prefer.
One last thing on Sid. I mean, we could do, and we eventually will do an entire Sid Caesar program because he deserves it. He deserves it. Milton Berle deserves it. Ernie Kovacs. But these are names that I don't know how well they would draw, but I'm thinking of putting them all together and making it like pioneers of early television so that we can incorporate all these different legends at once and show clips of each one of them, which would be kind of fun. But Sid in real life, he was very combustible. And if you watch My Favorite Year, again, I recommend that movie. Joe Bologna plays his part, and he is always yelling at somebody and screaming at somebody, and then he takes it back. And yeah, I might have gone too far. Go buy him a set of tires for his car. He would say silly things like that. But when he first met Howie Morris, he was introduced to him by Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks said, "There's a friend of mine, Howie Morris." Sid took him, picked him up, felt like he was weighing him. He said, "He'll do." He didn't even audition him. He just liked that he was a small, very compact guy that he could do physical things with. The other famous story about Sid is that he was having an argument about a line with Mel Brooks. They were in their office building. I think it was the 37th floor. And he picked up Mel by his lapels, took him out to the window and held him outside the window. And he said, "Which joke are we going to use?" And he said, "Your joke." And he brought him back in. So he was, as I said, very combustible, very, very, he knew what he needed to be funny. But he trusted his writers. He really did. He was also known, believe it or not, to be a very bad interviewee. He was very shy when he got in front of somebody who had to interview him, especially in his latter life. He was very, very soft-spoken and didn't like reflecting too much about his life. So
we have a question from Philip. He was wondering if we could just say a word about Jerry Stiller, who just passed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a great, great thing. You know, Still and Mirror, first of all, I remember growing up with them on the Ed Sullivan Show. Ann Mira grew up in Rockville Center, believe it or not. She's a Long Island kid. Then she met Jerry. What made their act so interesting is that they were the first act that spoke about religion. He was Jewish, she was Catholic, and they used it in their routines. They used that material to get laughs. They had a terrific career together, but then eventually Anne got upset because they did so much improvisational work that she got upset. She said, "I don't know where our life begins and the act begins. Everything is getting pushed together. There's no privacy left between us." And she said, "I think we should take a break from this for a while." And that's what they did. She went on and she ended up being a regular on Archie Bunker's Place. And there was no stopping Jerry Stiller. As we know, he went from Seinfeld to what was the other one? King of Queens. He just continually worked. He never stopped. A brilliant comedian. And what I loved about him, there's an old saying, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it." That was from Mae West. Mae West said, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it, and how you look when you say it and do it." That was, Mae West said that. And Jerry was the epitome of that. He could take a line that was so innocuous, a word that really didn't, a line that didn't have anything. "You expect me to believe that? We'll use that line." He would just bellow that line out. "You expect me to believe that?" And he just would yell out. He would make any scene funnier. And if you go on YouTube and look up Seinfeld bloopers, you're going to see great examples of him breaking up the rest of the cast where they just cannot keep it in because of his improvisational style. Good question. Good
Great question. We have a question from Ruth. She wants to know if what do you know about Sid's early life?
Oh, interesting. Sid, good question. Sid was working up in the Catskills, excuse me. He was in the Catskills. He was a saxophone player. That's what his job was. He was a saxophone player. And working up there as a tumbler was a very young Mel Brooks. So Mel and Sid formed this friendship. As a matter of fact, Mel grew up in Brooklyn, and his neighbor, I don't think you would remember him. He was a drummer by the name of Buddy Rich, and Mel and Buddy would teach Mel how to play the drums. So, and believe it or not, I've always felt that music and comedy go together. Great comedians, many of them played other instruments or sang, or look at Jackie Gleason creating all that great music that he did. Charlie Chaplin composed music for all his movies. Uh, but anyway, they formed this friendship. After the summers were over, naturally, Sid went his own way and started delving into comedy. Mel went his own way trying to get work. And eventually, Sid got the job on Your Show of Shows. Interestingly, Mel wanted to be on that show. And uh, Mel Tolkien, the head writer, hated Mel Brooks, did not like him at all. They would have fights all the time. And Mel Tolkien would throw lit cigars at Mel Brooks. But anyway, Sid brought him in. He said, I want to put him on the staff for the writing. I want him on my team. And Mel Tolkien said, no, there's no way we're hiring this clown. And he said, that's okay. And he said, I'll pay him. And he was paying Mel Brooks $50 a week to be part of Your Show of Shows. And that's how that all transpired. Good question.
Wow. Nina, going back to Stiller, if maybe the next Chit Chat on Zoom could be about Stiller and Mira. Perhaps.
Perhaps that's a good idea. I think I would incorporate maybe one or two other comedy teams, maybe some contemporaries that were around at the same time that Stiller and Mira were around. I don't know if you remember Alan and Rossi. They were really big at that time period. Comedy teams were really big, and we can go into a whole story about that. But going all the way back in time, starting at the very beginning of the 20th century, there were comedy teams. Like in the 1910s, there was Smith and Dale, who were the prototype for Neil Simon when he ended up writing the Sunshine Boys. When you got into the 20s, oh my gosh, that's where Laurel and Hardy began in silent movies. You hit the 30s and forget it, because everybody pops up in the 30s, the Marx Brothers and the Ritz Brothers and everybody else. And then you get into the 40s, here comes Abbott and Costello. The 50s, you got Martin and Lewis, you got, oh my gosh, just so many. You get into the 60s, and here come the Smothers Brothers and Rowan and Martin. But once you hit the 70s, it kind of just stops. It just it ceases to exist, and I think it's comedy teams just fell out of favor for a multitude of reasons. And I don't want to really go into it, but the crux of it is the 70s is when comedy clubs started popping up all over the country. And once the clubs started coming into play, they weren't paying these young comics, the Jerry Seinfelds and the Larry Davids and Ray Romanos. They were working for peanuts. Why split it with somebody else? I mean, you weren't making much money. If you got cab fare, that was it. So they rather work on their own, create their own identities, and that's how that all transpired. I think comedy teams it was the death knell to that. The only comedy team I can think of today, in today's world, would be Penn and Teller, and that would be only, that's incorporating magic with comedy. But I can't think of anybody else that's around that really can. Also, we had Burns and Allen. A lot of those people came out of vaudeville, where they had these great acts, and they were able to move into TV, radio, TV, movies, and become legends. So the young people today don't have that gift.
Yeah. We have a few more comments. Ruth says she would love to have another Chit Chat. Elisa says Burns and Allen, when we were talking about comedy teams. Definitely good recommendation. Nina says as well, she says, absolutely would love another Chit Chat. She's just missing the chocolate kisses.
That's so funny you bring that up. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do that again until this all passes over. Darren, I used to go around with a box of chocolates, and people loved it. You know, it was just a little gift from me to them, and that was it. I just felt, let's start out with a little treat, and everybody
Yeah.
enjoyed that. But I don't know if we're going to be able to do that in the future until everything settles down.
We'll have to see if we can build these programs out a little bigger. We'll send out gift boxes before the program so we can all have the same treat and coffee.
Yeah.
Laura says she agrees more comedy celebrities resume in programs would be great. Thanks. Elisa says the Tenderloins, the 3 comedians.
Yeah.
And Nina says we will wear gloves. So surprisingly, we have already been going for about 45 minutes. I think we need to wind this down.
Yeah.
Dad, do you have any last comments about Sid? And if anybody has any last minute questions that they would like to ask, please feel free now.
Well, I feel sad because even Darren wasn't 100% familiar with Sid Caesar. And I take blame for that because as he was, when he was little, and I would tuck him into bed at night, I would read him a story or make up a story or tell him some jokes. But then as I was leaving the room, he had a little Fisher-Price cassette player. And every night I would take a cassette, put it in there, and he would go to sleep listening to old-time radio shows. So he grew up with Abbott and Costello and Burns and Allen and Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy and Fibber McGee and Molly and Fanny Bryce. He was, oh, by the way, in terms of Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, you should have seen Darren's face when one day I took him into my office and I showed him a book with a picture of Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, and he had no idea that Charlie was a dummy. He had no clue, which is the magic of radio. That's the magic of your imagination. And I always like, so in that regard, I think I did not venture too far into the 50s and 60s because I was doing all these radio shows. But he did come home one day and he said, how come nobody knows about the honeymooners but me? So anyway, I thank you all. I truly do. Thank you so much for taking the time out to come out this morning, and I hope to do this again with you. And knowing Darren, he's going to be on me, come up with another idea.
Yep, absolutely.
If you have ideas, feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to entertain them.
Oh, everybody's saying thank you. Great stories to hear. Remind us of our old road trips, says Christine Jordan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. If you haven't already, please subscribe to join our mailing list. You can always keep track of what we have going on at salstgeorge.com. We have our shows and lectures that are available. We also have Sal's calendar, so you can keep up with what programs he has. We have our Facebook page. You can join us here. You can send us a message, like the page, follow along. And I'm also going to send this out as one last little piece for you. If you want a few more clips from Sid Caesar, we have 7 clips that Time Magazine put together. And I'll share that over in the comments section right now so you can enjoy that for some follow-up viewing. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.